everybody. Welcome to our Puna Kōrero meeting for the 15th of May 2025. To begin, we will start with our karakia. I'll invite Councillor Hayward to lead us in that.
Morning, everybody. Toru wha. Whakatakata hau ki te uru. Whakatakata hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta. Kia mā tātara ki tai. E hi ake ana, te atakura. He tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora.
Thank you, everyone. Moving through to apologies. There are no apologies, although I will note a leave of absence by Councillor Johnson and apologies for lateness for Taku Parai. So I will put that apology. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hayward, thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Opposed? That is carried. We're going to start today, before we move into public forum, very quickly, just as a heads up for councillors, we do have a workshop scheduled today that we can't move the timing on. If we haven't finished TPK business by 10:15, I'll adjourn the meeting. At that point, we'll have a brief morning tea break and then a workshop, and then we will come back to TPK after that workshop. So just a heads up ahead of time. We're going to now begin, though, with public forum. We've got one person speaking in public forum today, Caleb Austin. If you'd like to come forward, Caleb. Caleb, I'll hand over to you in a second. I think you've probably already been told this, but just so you know, you'll have 5 minutes to speak, and that 5 minutes includes time for questions. You'll hear a bell at 4 minutes. So if you would like the opportunity for councillors to ask questions, try wrap up at around that 4-minute mark. But otherwise, over to you.
Thank you very much. Just like to thank the council for their time this morning. I'll try and make this as brief as I can, but I probably won't be able to. So this relates to two key issues that happened. One was December 2022, which was related to roadworks and follow-up legoimas over the past couple of months. So originally at the time it was Christmas, I'd emailed the CEO about the roadworks and we had a brief discussion and then I sort of just forgot about it. Life went on. And my partner, someone did a FOIA request about where he works, and we sort of thought, why do we never FOIA the legoima the council about what happened originally? So basically at that point, my curiosity sort of peaked and I was like, why did the council think these roadworks were acceptable? What policies do they have in place? So I sort of pulled on that string, and what unravelled was quite surprising, frankly. So for original context on the roadworks, the contractor had a piece of equipment called a milling machine, which rips up the road surface. It's basically an excavator on treads that is just a giant jackhammer, and it's rated for about 74 to 104 decibels. That's the equivalent of a car doing revving just outside your house constantly. And that was all night consistently for 4 nights in a row, so we could not stay at home. We had to stay at my parents'. We could not live in our house. And that would have been the same for everyone on that street. So that's the human impact, and that's what started this series of events to me being here now. So in the process of legoimas, I was asking mostly about council policy. Why did the council think having roadworks at night in a residential area using this equipment was acceptable? I asked the council why did they engage a contractor that they knew was going to use such a heavy piece of machinery, and the council said that is up to the contractor. It says in our agreement they must abide by standard NZS 6807, I believe. And there is no way that piece of machinery could abide by such a standard because basically at night you can't emit noise that by the time it reaches a house would be 30 decibels or 40, I forget. I did leave a noise complaint. I did ask for a guard to come out. I made 3 calls in that first night and the council has no record of it. No one was ever sent out. There was no follow-up. I should have left a formal complaint. However, I emailed a councillor, Mike Duncan, and that went, and I was directed to the CEO, and I sort of just forgot about it at that point. I'm back here now trying to correct this. I don't think the council should be doing works in a residential area at night while engaging a contractor that is going to use such heavy machinery. I think that sort of just answers itself. I think the council needs to take a look at its policies and procedures for such things. For example, Wellington City Council will allow night works up to 11 p.m, by which point they will basically only do lane marking and other minor things, which I think is a fair compromise. 11 p.m. is still a bit late, but these things do have to get done. I also asked the council why they didn't do a detour. There is traffic calming on 2 roads nearby, but they could have gone down to 1 lane as well. They'd done that prior for waterworks as well. I think that's pretty much everything I would like to cover if anyone has any questions for me.
Cool. Thank you very much, Caleb. I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Ford.
Sorry, just a quick question, Caleb. Thank you for coming in. I just want, for context, where are we talking about?
Oh, sorry. Waitangaroa.
Waitangaroa.
Yeah, this is Warspite Ave.
So the roadworks that you're referring to, is that just repairing roads or the pipes going in?
So originally the council had closed that lane down to that road down to one lane only a few weeks prior to this for waterworks, and then slightly further up the road, just like 2-3 weeks later, there are night works done. So I'm just using that contrast of standards for different things.
All right, thank you.
Councillor, we're happy.
Thank you. Following on from that, is that the resealing of the road?
Yes.
Right.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. Were there other neighbours involved in this? Like, did you get other neighbours to join in the...
No, because it's been so long, I didn't want to go bringing this up with other people. I'm sure if you went to other people and you had a chat with them, they would remember it if they were living there at the time.
Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Caleb, for coming in. I'm just wanting to just ascertain your work in investigating the measures taken by Wellington City by contrast. Did you investigate any of the other councils in terms of giving other examples, or failing that, well, would you have looked at the regulatory structures that are in place?
So I did have a brief look at Auckland. Basically, what they have a similar thing to Wellington, but no specific details publicly available. I didn't feel like doing more Lagoimas at this point. I've wasted enough public time. But basically, there is a standard called NZS 6803 that sets out basically the
Construction noise.
construction noise, yeah, and that does apply to any form of construction noise, roadworks included.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm just going to go one more question from Councillor Leggett before we wrap this up.
Thanks for coming in, Caleb.
Thank you.
So my question is, I sympathise with what you've said. What would you like us to do? Would you like us to recognise that this has happened and make sure that it doesn't happen to anyone else again?
That's pretty much it. I think quite simply the council shouldn't be engaging contractors that are going to do their job in such a way that it will breach the standard in the contract that they've set. That's basically it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I
you very much for your
very much
time.
appreciate your time coming in and getting through as much information as you did in a short period of time. We do appreciate that. All right. That's the end of public forum for today. I'm going to move through to conflict of interest declarations. Are there any conflicts of interest? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. Item 7.1, local alcohol policy. I'm the Deputy Chair of the Licensing Committee. However, I can bring an open mind to the debate and decision-making in the topic. I also have to say I'm a non-drinker.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duncan. Councillor, we're happy.
You set me up. Just like, you set me up with that one. I just want it noted that I am the chair of the District Licensing Committee. However, I'm here with as a councillor and an open mind. Thank you.
Councillor Waddle.
Yes, just in relation to item 7.1, I currently hold a manager's certificate in my day job at New World Whitby, but today I'm here as a city councillor and I'm bringing an open mind to the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Waddle. Councillor Hayward.
And I guess we just keep on going with the 7.1 take. I need to identify that I, yet again, identify as the patron of the Titahi Bay Bowling Club. I've had no dealings or conversations with the committee. They handle their matters on a day-to-day basis. I'm not in those discussions. So I feel I'm competent to bring forward an open mind. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Mayor Baker.
I'm the same as the others. Definitely bring an open mind as a member of Whitby Bowling Club. Excuse me.
Thank you very much. Are there any further declarations of conflicts? Don't appear to be any. All right. In that case, notification of extraordinary business, no items or extraordinary business. I'll move through to the confirmation of minutes from our 1 May meeting. I will move those, seconded by Councillor Leggett. Are there any corrections to the minutes? There do not appear to be any. I will, in that case, I will put them. All those in favour, please say aye. Opposed? That is carried. That brings us through to item 7.1, deliberations report for the local alcohol policy review. I just want to advise council that I have a chair's recommendation. Officers have merged 2 of the newly established priority 5 areas, Cannons Creek and Ranui Mungavin, to become Porirua East. The correct information is included further in the paper with rationale. So I recommend that recommendation 3A be amended to read 4 newly established priority areas. These are Porirua East, Ilston, Takapuahia, Titahi Bay, and the city centre. So I'll move that report with the recommendation to open it for discussion. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Baker, thank you very much. Do we want any comment from officers before we get started, or we move straight into our deliberation? We can move straight into deliberations. I understand that we have a proposed amendment from Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, with the small number of submissions from the community, and even those are not comprehensively in favour of change, I don't believe we have a mandate to change the LAP from its current form. So I want to propose an amendment to item 2 of the recommendation, and that is that we agree to recommend that the council approve a new local alcohol policy 2025 with the same provisions as the current local alcohol policy. That's item 2.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duncan. Before we have any discussion, I will believe there is a seconder for that proposed amendment.
John, just confirm.
1 second. So just confirming, sorry, Councillor Duncan, that your proposed amendment is to replace current recommendations 2, 3 and 4
Yes.
with what you've proposed. All right. So yeah, is there a seconder? Councillor Leggett. Okay, so that has been moved and seconded. It is on the table for discussion. Councillor Duncan, would you like to speak any further to your proposal before I open it to broader discussion?
Yeah, that'd be great. Sure, we got 46 submissions, but some of the stats showed less than half actually supporting the change. Statistics like 21 of the 46 submissions supported reducing off licences, 8 did not, 7 partially supported and 10 didn't respond. Item 43 summed it up for me. Community submissions signal that the community support the change. However, council must consider the following. Whether 46 submissions are sufficient evidence to give elected members confidence that the recommended options reflect community preferences, and no, they don't, certainly not for me. And whether now is the right time to pursue changes that could incur a financial impact for council and ratepayers, a risk of judicial review, and whether there's community support to prioritise budget on this. And finally, things will look different for council after water reforms, and we probably should look then to make big changes. But at the moment, I think the status quo should prevail.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duncan. Would anybody else like to speak to this amendment? Councillor Hayward.
Ata marie a mātua upoko mihi, he mihi kinga, kai mahi katoa. I'll speak to the amendment. Thank you to the officers for the mahi that has been done so far. I just want to make that clear. While the number of submissions that we have received might be modest, I want to be clear, the value of the feedback is not always in the volume, but in the manner of those who give it. Many of the organisations who have submitted work at the coalface of harm in our homes, our streets, our health services, their voices carry real weight with me because they speak for many of those who feel that they may not be able to speak for themselves. I also would take note that we have also had a range of submissions from operators as well. The social impact assessment is confronting, and rightly so. It tells us what many in our community already know, that the status quo is causing harm, serious harm. To ignore that is not just bad policy making, it's a failure of leadership. And frankly, it risks showing how out of touch some of us might be with the daily reality for whānau in our communities. I want to quote from Te Ai Manino Trust, who submitted this kōrero. Quote, a child says, I did not have a good day at school because I know that after school he will be too drunk and abuse us, especially my mother. A wife says he drinks every day, every payday, and he goes for more in the morning. There is no money and rent is behind. That is why he argued and he beat me. This is not a theoretical debate. These are real lives, real children, real people, and real consequences of inaction. We have a responsibility with our limited toolbox. So I oppose any amendments that take us backwards. We have an opportunity to do better and a responsibility to not turn our backs when the evidence is laid before us. I urge you all, let's choose to be bold, compassionate, and be in step with the needs of our community. Let's move forward, not backwards. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Are there any further comments in relation to this proposed amendment? Councillor Leggett.
I as well thank the officers for bringing this forward and for the discussion that's taken place already out in public and by those that have submitted on this. There can be no doubt that alcohol does cause harm, but there is doubt, I believe, and I'm not entirely convinced, doubt that changes that of the nature that was being suggested will actually reduce harm. I think that I have some concerns about that. I also have concerns about whether or not, and I ask this question, whether or not the DLC has the powers or the ability currently to make things like discretionary conditions apply already, so that we already have the power to do many of the things that are being suggested here.
Would we be able to have an officer response to that question? Perhaps, Councillor Leggett, if you maybe just want to repeat that question.
Does the District Licensing Committee already have the powers or the ability to make some of the discretionary conditions that are being talked about in this paper, to make those available to us now?
My understanding of the process that the DLC take is they can access any information to support decisions that they would like to make. So they do have the ability to call on experts in whatever field they need. But they do basically, under the legislation, have the ability to introduce the discretionary conditions we've got. Obviously, within reason, applicants can still go through a process to dispute those.
Thank you.
Mayor Baker.
Thank you. I agree it's not the number of submissions, but I do think the policy is working as it is now. I liked the change in area with the Ranui to Mangevin to Porirua East. My issue is people can already go online and order their alcohol and get it delivered outside of those hours anyway. So if people want to access it, it's there. They can do it online. And I do think we will be hit up by the supermarkets, and it'll be another dragging through the courts process. But I do think the system's working. I think our DLC is putting those extra conditions on when required. One of them for the club licences, having someone on there all the time compared to having a set licensee. I think some of those clubs may struggle. But it's more about the conditions. So I'm happy with what we're doing at the moment.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. Doesn't look like anybody else wants to speak to this amendment. Sorry, Councillor Filo.
It's just a question, really. Can officers speak to, is there really to the legal costs that could come with regards to the supermarket? Do you have any insight around, I mean, you said in the report that it seemed quite solid, the process, so there's been concerns raised that, it's going to cost a lot if we have to go into a legal battle with them. So can you give a bit more assurance or info about that, please?
I can't speak to the costs because I don't have a quote or an amount of what it would cost to take us through a judicial review. All I can say is the legal advice we have gained from Simpson Grierson states that we are in a good position if we were taken to judicial review, and there's minor risk for us to, basically we would be in a good place to be successful if we were to be reviewed based on the process that we've taken.
That's all good. Yeah, I'll just invite Wendy to speak to that as well.
It's a little unknowable what the legal costs would be, but from memory, I think Wellington City was taken through court in the last round. I think that cost hundreds of thousands, but very expensive, but it depends on the legal arguments a bit. So it's kind of hard to know, but they don't come cheap. Lawyers and particularly court appearances don't come cheap.
I guess what I was asking more is, like, given the advice that you got from the legal team, is it likely that they would, pursue a case? Did they indicate whether the work that you've done, is it likely that they would pursue us?
They don't commit lawyers around that,
No, I know,
unfortunately. But I mean, the best advice is the advice that Jade has already given you, that we are in a good position to defend it, but it doesn't really go to whether you'll win it or how much it will cost, but that we've got a good case to support us.
All right, I've just got a comment I'll make, and then I'll come back to you if you'll write a reply after that, Councillor Duncan. I'll be voting in opposition to this amendment. I think we've done some really good work around this proposed policy. And in particular, I think we've struck a balance really well based on the submissions that we got from the public between our approach on licence and off-licence venues. I think we know that the majority of the harm that we have is in relation, within Porirua, is in relation to off-licence venues. I think our focus on that is appropriate, and I think we've actually responded really well to concerns raised by the public around making sure that we're not introducing too arduous requirements for our on-licence venues. So I'm very comfortable with that. In relation to the question around legal risk, I think it's really responsible that we are cognizant of legal risk. It's really good that we talk about that. But I'm at the same time, I'm comforted by the fact that we do have advice that suggests we have good footing. And I don't think, particularly in situations such as this one, where there is a strong public policy reason for us to progress forward with what is being proposed here, I don't think we should be intimidated by the threat of legal action away from doing the right thing. So absolutely important that we're cognizant of it. I think it's responsible that we talk about it. But based on the advice that we have at the moment, I'm comfortable with us progressing. I think it's the right thing to do. And so that's why I'm going to be voting opposed to this amendment. I just want to provide one last opportunity before I go back to Mike for his right a reply. Is there anyone that hasn't spoken? Councillor Waddle.
Yes. Look, it's a tricky one. I think, Councillor Hayward's spoken to not the volume of response, but the content of the responses to this. But you've also got to look at the fact that we had more submissions towards the Keeping the Animals bylaw than we did to the LAP, and to show what people are genuinely concerned about in our city is quite interesting. The work that's been done by officers on the LAP currently on this proposed review is fantastic, and I commend you for the work you've done. The research that's gone into it has been fantastic. There are the recommendations that have come through, and I know we're not talking about that. We're talking about this amendment at the moment, but there's missed opportunities. There's sort of inconsistencies around. I could place an order at 6 a.m. and get the box of beers delivered to me before 9 a.m. before the supermarket's open. That's more enabling than delaying until going to the shops to do your supermarket shopping and get your groceries. I understand that was it's not what we'd originally proposed, was not in line with the Act, and we've brought that recommendation in because of what submissions had said. But there's there's other areas where we could have done more, I think, in what we've suggested. My son goes to daycare in Waitangiroa, and each day I drive past a glaring beacon of a liquor store that would entice anyone in, and it's literally shares a fence with my son's daycare, and that's in Waitangiroa, which has not been included as part of the Porirua East area. And we've gone through and we've deliberated on the context that we need to the deprivation index, but there's nowhere else in the city that I can think of off the top of my head where a liquor store building is adjacent to a daycare and in one of the most vulnerable communities. I think we've ticked the few boxes, but we've missed more boxes. So yeah, I'm really struggling with this proposed alcohol policy, and I'm also not sure how I'm going to vote on this amendment. So,
Councillor, we're happy.
Thank you. I still think there's more work to be done on this before we make a decision on the LAP. It is actually a very important document. I think that the timing of the submissions in time with two other items that we had was a little bit off. We weren't able to focus on it fully because we had other items that we were submitting on at the same time. I do agree with Councillor Hayward in regards to more of the substance and not the number. But then again, I still think that we have had, like Councillor Waddle has said, some missed opportunities. I think that we still need to do some more work in this area. And so I will be voting in favour of Councillor Duncan's amendment.
Could I just invite council officers before I come back to Councillor Duncan, just around some of the concerns that have been raised by other councillors, and in particular the fact that some around the table think there might be a little bit more work to do. If we were to progress with the amendment as has been proposed, so we approve a new alcohol policy 25 with the same provisions as the current LAP, when would the next opportunity be for council to look at this again if we do progress with this?
So the legislation states that we must review within 6 years. So we basically can review at any point in that 6-year period. So we can bring the review forward if councillors would like.
Okay. And I guess just for clarity, given the particular timeline we're operating within at the moment, conscious that we don't have all year to work through these sorts of things, if we progress with this, will this be the last opportunity for us to look at the LAP in this council term?
Possibly. You'll be aware that Jade, who has done most of the work on this, has shifted jobs. This is her swan song on this particular issue. So not sure we've got the staff resources. We typically wouldn't consult post-July on any changes that were made. So we're perilously close to that pre-election period. Yes, possibly.
And so in that same vein, if we were to not progress with the proposed amendment and instead progress with what officers have recommended, there would also be nothing to stop us coming back and making further changes in the same way. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes, but please have in mind too, we do have a full work program and a lot of our energy in the next 12 months will be on water reform, frankly, and we run a very small, lean team here in these policy matters. So reviewing, these are kind of big deals, and trying to run them every year is, it's just hard work for us to do that. We'd have to drop other things to do that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to invite Councillor Duncan to close out the discussion on this amendment.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. Sure, the substance of submissions is really important, but remember, a lot of those groups are interest groups that have specific ideas already set. They haven't any views of other sides of things. I'm also mindful, and I've mentioned before, how a regional view would be much better than just doing it council by council, because otherwise we just drive people to Tawa or to Lower Hutt to go and get their alcohol when they can. And prohibition for me has never worked. You just need to look at methamphetamine for seeing something that's completely banned, and it's more available than alcohol is at the moment in our community. So for me, I think what we're doing with the LAP at the moment is working, and it's working well. Hold on to it for the time being.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. So with that, I'm going to put the amendment. Just to clarify so everyone knows exactly what we're voting for, the proposed amendment is that we're replacing recommendations 2, 3 and 4 in the current paper with what Councillor Duncan has proposed, which would be that the LAP has the same provisions as the current LAP. All those in favour of that amendment, please say aye. Opposed? Okay, I'm going to have to do a count up for that. So I'm going to put this again. I'll ask you to raise your hand. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Weehapi, Councillor Waddle, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Leggett and Mayor Baker. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed, raise your hand. Councillor Ford, Councillor Hayward, Councillor Nalo, Councillor Philo and myself. I will use my casting vote on that. The amendment fails. With that, we are going to come back to the substantive motion. So we are reverting back to the motion that we had as proposed by officers. Is there any further discussion that people would like to have in relation to this? Councillor Ford.
Just a quick clarification around Porirua East. In the original, it didn't include Waitangiroa, and I think you've heard it's quite vocal around here that we're wondering why you've left out one of the most vulnerable parts of Porirua East out of that area. So can I...
Sure. So we did get three submissions there that requested Waitangiroa to be included. The reason we did not include that through our recommendations is purely looking at the criteria matrix that we use to decide on those priority areas. Waitangiroa only met one of the sets of data. It did not meet all three or more than one. So that was how we made the decisions. We also do have legal advice that we did ask for on this, and basically councillors are able to make the decision themselves on whether they would like to include Waitangiroa based on the submissions. The submissions are considered to be evidence enough on what our community want to decide to include those.
Can I propose an amendment to include Waitangiroa as one of the priority areas?
Yes.
All right.
Are you including it as Porirua East, or are you... Yeah.
Yep.
So you'll...
Okay, so we've got a proposed amendment and it's seconded by Mayor Baker. Before we progress further, I just want to get the exact wording for this amendment up on the screen. So we'll put this up and then I'll just confirm once it's...
We can include Waitangiroa in Porirua East. It would just mean that the criteria matrix we use to determine that area would not meet the threshold we've set.
That's no problem, as long as it's noted that Waitangiroa is part of it. I just...
Sure, we can
in
do
your
that.
earlier papers...
So we will expand the map
Yeah.
and we'll make reference in the policy document to Waitangiroa being included as Porirua East.
Thanks. In which case, does that need to be an amendment, or is it just noted?
I think it needs to be amendment.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, for the avoidance of doubt, let's make sure that we vote on this as an amendment.
So the mayor can't second this, she's...
Yeah, so we'll need a different seconder, seconded by Councillor Weehapi. Sorry, seconded by Councillor Weehapi. My microphone was off when I said that.
So what's the word?
Okay, so Councillor Ford, do you have specific wording you would like to...
May I assist in saying that we if you go back up, to the substantive, and that the amendment, what has been suggested is that it would be to amend 3A to include five new priority areas, and then in between Alston, Takapawahia, between Porirua East and Alston, Takapawahia, include the word Waitangirua.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Does that include Ascot Park?
Oh,
I thought we were including Waitangarua as part. Oh, okay.
Which you could include as in parentheses if you wanted to, remove that out.
So this proposed wording we have, I'm going to read this out and then I'm going to confirm that our mover and seconder are comfortable with it. So the proposal is that the recommendation 3A read 4 newly established priority areas. These are Porirua East, including Waitangarua, Ilson Takapawahia, Titahi Bay, and the city centre.
What we're doing?
We have to have a verb.
Yes, so the current wording. Yeah. Wait, so sorry to clarify.
English.
So we're amending recommendation 3, and recommendation 3 is just noting that the new policy includes 4 newly established. Cool. Yeah,
It's all good?
yeah. So I think we're comfortable with that, and I think it's clear what the intention is, and that we've discussed that. Would anybody else like to speak to this proposed amendment? Councillor Leggett.
I'd just like to understand, even though we have advice, so we had a clear matrix before, and we're now diverting from the findings of the matrix, and how, regardless of the fact that you have some advice as to we can make this decision based on the consultation that we've done and the feedback that we've got, somebody still could take us to court and cause us to incur costs to defend this. Is that correct?
That is correct. Essentially, any decisions made in this process can be taken through to judicial review.
So I'm just cogitating about the likelihood of that, because we have moved away from our own process. Does this give somebody more opportunity to have a go at us? Well, I'm just worried. I mean, I agree with the amendment, given that this is where we're at now, but I'm worried about council incurring unnecessary costs for the sake of this.
It's quite a tricky question to answer. Obviously, I can't give you what a judge's perspective might be if we were to go through. What I can say is we did consult on the priority areas, and we did provide the community with the opportunity to suggest any new priority areas they thought would be relevant or for us to consider, for council to consider. That is essentially what has happened. So the legal advice is looked at basically if there is a good enough argument proposed through submissions for councillors to consider, which is essentially what's happened, then the decision can be made. However, I cannot give any confidence on what the likely outcome could be through a judicial review.
Sorry, can I just... I'm not concerned about the outcome. I'm concerned about the possibility, due to the fact that we've gone outside our matrix, basically, that somebody will say, here's an opportunity to have a go, and the costs that that council would incur because of that. I'm only worried about costs in this case. That's all. The outcome doesn't matter. It's just the fact that somebody would do it and we would have to defend it.
Can I just make a brief comment on that? I mean, there's obviously a gap in the logic, if you like, but we did receive submissions for those of us who live and work in this community. It kind of makes good geographical sense, I think, to include Waitangarua. And I guess the likelihood of challenge really sits with who is likely to challenge. Is there anybody in the community or who have some interest in this that community that would say, council, you've got it wrong and this is going to damage my interests, whatever they might be. And elected members have a better read than officers often of that possibility. It doesn't seem that high. You know, certainly some of those well-heeled commercial interests are probably, when you threaten their interests, they're more likely to, they've got deeper pockets, let's put it frankly, to challenge these things. So over to you to make that assessment, really.
Look, I agree. I was just asking the question, that's all. I'm not against it. It would only be a significant commercial interest that I think would have a go at this. No individual is going to put up the money to go to judicial review. It would just be a supermarket or someone else. And I just ask, how likely is that? Because that would incur us costs if they went down that path. Look, as I said, it's a great amendment, I believe. I'm just asking the question.
I've just got a quick comment and then I'll come to Councillor Uehape in a second. I think based off what we've heard there, I think my view on this, I support this amendment. I think it's entirely appropriate that the recommendation officers brought to us was the one they brought, and that's because that followed the particular matrix that we used in order to determine this. So I think it's entirely appropriate that that's the official advice. I also think it's entirely appropriate that we look at that and can decide to make a different decision based on those submissions. And I think for anyone concerned about any potential challenge, let's be really clear about the fact that we're not doing this on a whim. There were some really good submissions that made us think about this. And in particular, the one that really shifted me in relation to this was, I recall a submission, I can't remember who it was from, highlighting a concern around if Waitangarua being the only place in that immediate area that wasn't included, it could have the perverse outcome of anyone who wants to open a new liquor store, they all end up being concentrated in the same place. I thought that was a very reasonable community concern, and I think it's entirely appropriate that we respond to that. So, yeah, understand that issue. I'll be supporting this amendment for that reason. I want to come next to Councillor Uehape.
Thank you. Obviously, I supported this amendment, but also with some of the concerns, this is another reason why I believe we needed to do more work around this. However, matrix or no matrix, we know our own communities. Yeah. You know, Waitangarua is a priority area alone as it stands. So I'd be very surprised if anyone was to challenge that in the LAP, and it isn't completely appropriate to include Waitangarua in this, so this is why I am supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Uehape. Are there any further comments or questions on this proposed amendment? There do not appear to be any. Councillor Ford, do you wish to speak again to this before we vote?
No, I just wanted to clarify it was 4 submissions, not 3, that came through in favour of including Waitangarua. Just going to your report where it states that, but also there was a point in particular in that report that made me think, why not? Where you say alcohol licences could increase in density in Waitangarua if it were not a priority area, and yet we decided not to include them. So, I mean, there were other points in there too, but that in particular, I'm like, what are we doing? We've got these tools that we can utilise. Let's do that.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Ford. With that, I'm going to put the proposed amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is carried. I'll return now to the substantive motion. Any further discussion or questions? Councillor Hayward.
Kia ora no. Again, thank you to the officers for preparing the material. I know that these are tense topics with particularly regard to the stakeholders that are involved, and the possibility of litigation is always one that I guess can cause palpitations for some. However, how we confront that is by having a robust process and showing our working, which I believe in today's meeting we've been able to demonstrate that. Council has a responsibility to act when harm in our community is clear. This is one of those moments. The decisions we make here will impact whānau for years to come, and we cannot afford to be passive. Porirua's local alcohol policy has often been cited as being at the apex, a strong example of how communities can take control over alcohol availability. Well, the truth is, we can always do better. Policy should never be static. It must evolve as our understanding deepens and as our community's needs change. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the Porirua Club for their thoughtful contribution. They articulated well the challenges faced by club licence holders. That insight helps us draw an important distinction. Not all licensees contribute equally to harm. The focus of our efforts should remain squarely on where the greatest harm is occurring, and in my view that is with off licences, particularly in terms of volume sold, affordability and ease of access. That is where we need the strongest tools. Now, a freeze is not a sinking lid, but it is something. It creates a pause, a breathing space for communities under pressure, and an opportunity to reassess. And I think that this is a pragmatic and necessary step. I also want to reiterate the issue of sensitive sites that were raised by Alcohol Health Watch. I don't believe we've got this right. I think that people seeking help for addiction do so in many ways, through community services, through faith-based groups, through health providers, and yes, through pharmacological treatment. If we define the sites too narrowly, we risk of the problem. Our policy should reflect the complexity of the recovery journey. But this isn't the end of the road. There are still critical issues left on the table for a future LAP review. Te Whatu Ora have also recommended the prohibition of event licences for events that focus on children and young people. And they've also raised concerns about linking alcohol consumption with driving events. These are serious matters and they are deserving of further consideration. So I support where we've got to. Yes, there are tangible improvements, but let's be clear-eyed, there is still unfinished business. Our communities are still asking for action and we must keep going. Kia ora.
Councillor Whilo.
Thanks. I really want to acknowledge the recommendation to keep the current hours for the on-licence venues, so restaurants and clubs. These places aren't just where people go to drink. I was at one last night in my neighbourhood. There was a quiz night on. We had a nice meal, and it was a good vibe. These are places where people connect. There's social places, spaces, and already have a really strong safety systems in place. So that's important, and I think that's part of why we've taken this approach. So I want to acknowledge that part for the on-licence. In terms of what we've spoken about with costings and the unlikelihood or the likelihood of litigation, I just wanted to talk a little bit around the two. There's really two things, right? With the off licenses, is the freeze on new licenses, and then the second one is the change of hours. So, I guess my question before was based on those changes of hours. Is that the likelihood? I was talking about likelihood of litigation with that, and it doesn't. I mean, we didn't get too much pushback from the supermarkets, but if you could talk to that after, if that's allowed, that would be great. Also, going down the track, if we could get a commitment that councillors will be kept in the loop early, especially around any risk or response. I note that there was some monitoring to be put in place, monitoring to see how this policy is working over time, and just checking will elected members get to see monitoring data before the next review, so that we can know where it's landing and where it needs improving. But overall, this policy seems to be trying to reduce harm and recognising the role that these businesses play in our communities as well.
So to the first question regarding litigation, so can I just clarify, are you asking whether the two main changes we're making, the off-licence hours and the priority area freeze, are those, you're asking whether those are the two most likely reasons we would be taken to litigation? Yes, is the answer. So those are the two largest changes to the policy that are likely to cause concerns for industry.
I guess a quick question, was there any risk analysis done around that in terms of,
In what way?
like, looking at those hours, looking at the freeze? Did the lawyer say, oh, yes, they're really going to go at us for this, or they said, no, they actually probably, it should be
So essentially, judicial review can only be based on the process that we've followed. They cannot review the outcome. So the final policy is not likely to be the focus area of a judicial review. It's the process that we've followed to get to that policy. So essentially, they would have to find an error or an issue with the process followed to then dispute that in a court. So we can imagine that those likely to take us to judicial review would be concerned with those two biggest outcomes, but in terms of the process they take, we can't really know what they would potentially raise. On your second question regarding reporting and monitoring, so obviously, as I've said before, the review process gives us 6 years in the legislation, so we have 6 years to review the current policy again. And we can bring that forward depending on obviously resource and what elected members would like. In terms of the reporting and monitoring process, we're looking at potentially a 3-year cycle. So we would basically gather all the data just for internal purposes to check in to see how it's going, possibly bring that to councillors, and then, yeah. So, but that's part of the implementation stuff that we're still working through.
I've got Councillor Ford and then Mayor Baker.
I've got a question, but I'm not sure. I'll ask it anyhow. It's just around the discretionary conditions that DLC might put in if someone came. If someone was to question that, that's outside of us. That goes to ALA. Is that right? And the costs go somewhere else.
So
legal.
Yes and no. So there is a process that our DLC will follow. So with discretionary conditions, they're not. They are applied in process with the applicants. So the applicants have opportunities to go through with the DLC through a hearing to dispute. Even before they get to a hearing, there's an opportunity to discuss what they would mean, how they might impact the licensee. And then if there's no agreement at that stage, they go to hearing. If the hearing also does not resolve concerns, that's when they would potentially go to ARLA.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Mayor Baker.
Thank you. Even though I supported Councillor Duncan, I'm happy to support this now that we've changed the wording and Waitangarua, and might like to suggest to the councillors or whoever's at the table next time that we actually look at our signage bylaw, because then maybe the flashing lights at these places could be removed. So next time we do the signage bylaw, how about we look at that?
But before it is, we'll move along. Any other comments or questions from councillors on this? Councillor, are we happy?
Just to say thank you very much for your work on this.
Yeah. You know, I think there's been really good work on this, and in particular, I want to draw attention to, I think we've threaded the needle really well with recommendation 5B around the freeze and off licences with the rebuttal presumption. I think that's a really good process for us to go through. We've identified that there's clear harm that's occurring in the community. So we're saying freeze in those areas, no new off licences, but actually if you can prove that you are able to open up a new store, for example, a supermarket, in a responsible way, then there is a process for us to be able to do that. That feels reasonable to me. I think it's a good compromise in terms of what we're looking for. And that's a really key thing that I just want to draw attention to and support. So I think everybody's had the opportunity to speak. So with that, I'm going to put the substantive motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you very much, officers. We will move now through to item 7.2. Item 7.2 Deliberations for the proposed Keeping of Animals Bylaw 2025. I will move the report to open it for discussion. It's seconded by Councillor Hayward. I will begin by inviting council officers to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. To start with, quick refresher, the Keeping of Animals Bylaw 2025 is aimed at it. So what it does is it regulates the nuisance caused by domestic animals kept in a private context. We have elected to review the bylaw several years ahead of its scheduled statutory review time for a number of reasons. The current bylaw has not been working as intended to resolve nuisance complaints. We have had some complaints take several years to resolve, in part because of ineffective nuisance provisions. It is also a response to intensification. Because people are now starting to live more closely together, the nature of animal nuisance is changing from the context in which the bylaw was last reviewed. The updates are overall aimed at streamlining enforcement for efficiency. So the proposed updates to the bylaw have been informed by officers involved with enforcing the current bylaw, Apiculture New Zealand, the American Foulbrood Management Agency, the Wellington Beekeepers Club, and the SPCA, and also the New Zealand Companion Animals Register. Most submitters, we have found, were generally in support of the proposed changes, but we received some pretty compelling evidence to loosen some of the limits. The updates from the consultation version can be summed up as: we have elected to loosen the beehive and chicken limits. We have also elected to update the definition of nuisance for increased clarity, as well as updating the definition of some animals for added clarity as well. The key change from the consultation version of the bylaw is we are proposing a free exemption system. It is intended to allow for those that wish to keep animals outside the limits set out in the bylaw. In practice, it is likely to affect those keeping large numbers of chickens and stock in suburban areas. The exemption system is a response to feedback from residents which showed that Porirua's suburban context is quite wide-ranging and diverse. It means we have a lot of suburban areas that do have the section space and the ability to keep fairly large numbers of stock, and we acknowledge that a fair number of our submitters do keep stock and larger numbers of chickens without fanfare and or nuisance to their neighbours. We anticipate it will only affect a small number of animal keepers in suburban areas, so no added resources will likely be needed when implementing it. We understand that that the changes in the proposed bylaw are fairly radical. I believe it is probably the most radical update the bylaw has had since it came into force in 1991. As a result, we will be fairly relaxed in enforcing these changes for the first year or so while the public adjusts to the adjust to the changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks very much for this report. It made a lot of sense to me right through it. I looked to page 91 though, and the definition of poultry, and I wonder if the regional council's Canada geese could be brought into this.
Rhetorical? Councillor Waddle and then Councillor Hayward.
Yeah, thank you for this, and yeah, really good work on this this bylaw, and good considerations to what has been what we received through consultation. There've been a predominant number of stray cats that frequent my property. In the last week or so, I've noticed they've sort of disappeared. Maybe they've been reading council documents and realised that their time is numbered. But much to the chagrin of my cat, I think she quite enjoys socialising with the strays. Don't ask me why. But she is fixed, as Councillor Leggett has asked, so that's good. And I think, you know, the way we're going with, especially the cat provisions in here, I think is a good start. We may not be able to have the people on the ground to enforce all this sort of stuff, but it's a good start. And I think for our native fauna, it's important that we look at protecting that and looking after cats to a point where they are. We do not see the number of strays and feral cats roaming our community. So yeah, no, thank you for this.
Thank you, Councillor Waddle. Councillor Hayward.
I have a question, but I want to come back for comment later on if possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's in regards to 27A. Thank you, officers, for bringing in the report and reflecting the feedback from the submitters as well. I'd be keen to kind of walk through the process of the definition of nuisance and how that came about and where the sources of that. My reading of that definition of nuisance comes awfully close to a comment I made during the deliberations with regards to the legal definition of nuisance. But can officers give some clarity around that?
So I understand you are asking about where the definition of nuisance came from. Am I correct?
Your reinterpretation as defined in the paper on notice.
Right. So basically, the reinterpretation, it came from a number of sources. Firstly, other councils, and I compared their nuisance provisions, and also a particular New Zealand case from 1986, Bank of New Zealand versus Greenwood. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, go straight into comment.
Thank you very much, officers, for bringing this forward. I really want to give my sincere thanks for the considerable mahi that has been undertaken on this review, preparing the documentation, engaging with submitters, bringing forward the recommendations. It's detailed, it's often unappreciated work, and I mihi you all. I'm going to be supporting these proposed changes. They're measured, they're practical, they reflect the feedback that was received through consultation. This is entirely proper. But I would be remiss if I didn't raise some concern about the process itself. As I outlined in correspondence to the Mayor and the Chief Executive, there were ideas that emerged through the submission process, such as a prohibition on feeding cats in public places, as well as a limit on cat numbers, that were not included in the initial proposal and haven't been incorporated into this proposal today. While I acknowledge the advice that these would require further consultation, I do wonder whether our processes for incorporating new ideas need refining. If people take the time to engage with us, we should at least be open to exploring their whakaaro, so long as it can be shown that there is a clear connection to the policy outcomes. We are sending the wrong message if the system feels too rigid to accommodate community-driven innovation. That said, with regard to innovation, I believe that we could go further beyond the bylaw, and I think there's a clear opportunity here for Council to invest in a coordinated community-based approach to the management of stray cats. We could take inspiration from Wellington City's work, partnering with local animal welfare groups to safely house and de-sex stray cats. This kind of initiative would accelerate our ability to protect native species and improve animal welfare outcomes here in Porirua. And to be clear, Porirua is filled with responsible cat owners. They're filled to the brim. These are people who want to do the right thing, who already microchip, de-sex and register their pets. We should be working with them and not against them. Finally, to those who are concerned about the idea of microchipping cats, let me offer this light-hearted comparison. Sometimes cats get out and they play silly buggers, just like some of our kids have done over the years. And I know some of our more seasoned members around this table may remember a time when your kid was brought home by the cops after getting up to mischief. Microchipping is the same thing. It's about helping our furry whānau get home safely when they go wandering. So I support where we've landed, but I also believe that there's more we can do to be more responsive, more ambitious, and more collaborative when it comes to managing animals in our city. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Mayor Baker.
I hope you're not. Thank you. I hope you're not talking about me, Councillor, because it didn't happen to me. I'm pleased to say, best friend was the cop though. The cat bylaw, I'm happy. As much as you would have liked to have taken it further. We've seen a number of things online recently with cats getting run over. They have a chip, but the information's not been updated. So residents need to update them if they move or their phone numbers change. If you don't change them on a microchip basis, then it's never going to work. So I still agree with that. I've got a cat that doesn't go that far, apart from the whole neighbourhood to visit everybody for food and come home again. Not interested in wild animals, but still, I'm pleased with that. The beehives, I'm pleased we're not doing anything under 500, concerned over the limit change from 2 to 4, because I still firmly believe you should have food on your section to feed your bees, because these things are just going everywhere else. And yes, the complaints over the windows do not stop. So I'd like to know how officers are going to continue to deal with this, because yes, bees go straight to water, as we know, and that might be someone's house the whole time. But those complaints do not stop, and they come to me, and I am over bee complaints. So I really want to know how we're going to control this and what Office is going to do when it continues, now that we go from 2 to 4, and working with the Beehive people, because it still hasn't changed anything. But you've done a great job, so thank you very much.
So to answer your question about dealing with beehive-related complaints, bees have a great number of variables that are hard to regulate through a bylaw alone. So for that reason, we, the Wellington Beekeepers Club, have agreed to train our officers, and our officers quite gladly intend to take that opportunity. We are also working on an enforcement pathway for bee-related nuisance. So we are hoping that, combined with the hive limits, will hopefully reduce the number of bee complaints you get in your inbox. I hope that answers your question.
Well, we've increased the limits though, so probably not, but thank you.
Oh, yes. I should also answer that bee numbers tend to regulate themselves based on the food available. And I believe one of the submitters also mentioned the amount of food on one section, even if it's filled to the brim with flowers, is still not enough. So you can't stop them from travelling, I believe.
Councillor Leggett.
I'll be supporting this motion. I think the work done shows that we've chosen a balanced way forward. It might not be perfect for everyone, but at least it's balanced, and I think we're making some progress. So well done.
Councillor, we're happy.
Thank you. Yeah, I support what others have said. Very elated about the cats in here. I do know that it says it doesn't include feral animals, but as we know, there are feral cats out there. So hopefully, with other agencies, we can deal with that when we can. I know that there's a 1-year delay where you look to impose these restrictions on people. As you know, kittens can produce quite a few, cats and kittens can produce quite a few babies in a year, and by the time we start implementing this, we're already kind of, that's right. So I just wanted to comment on that. The other thing is I also note in here that one of the cons is that mandatory desexing can be difficult to enforce, and whilst I agree with that, I would think that our council will work closely not just with SPCA, but with all our local vets around the city as well. We do tend to just rely on SPCA, but I mean, as we know, their resources can sometimes be quite low, and particularly when in one of the submissions, I remember the lady from the SPCA was saying that. So if we can also work with our local vets and support their businesses, that'll be fabulous. Thanks.
For me on this, I'm going to be supporting what has been proposed. And there are just a few comments I wanted to make. First of all, at a very broad level, I was really happy to see that the approach we've taken here at looking at the submissions, it's really clear to me that the recommendations we have here aren't just factoring in the quantity, but the quality of the submissions and where we were getting that advice from. And in particular, some of the recommendations we have around bees, for example, I think it's really clear that we've listened to the experts in this area who know what they're on about, who understand how these things work, and we've created an environment, we're creating an environment which aligns with what they've recommended, while there are also very reasonable pathways that can be followed for people that have concerns. And in particular, hearing your concerns before, Mayor Baker, around complaints with bees, having also heard a number of complaints with bees, I think the biggest problem under the existing bylaw was the unclear definition of nuisance, the way in which we were actually providing that, applying that as a council, because in the absence of that clarity, the community didn't understand exactly what they had to do and what was reasonable. I think having this really clear definition of nuisance that's founded in case law is exactly the right approach. So I wanted to highlight that. Two other areas, one, first of all, in relation to bees, I'm really happy with the direction that we're moving in on this. I think broadly from an environmental perspective, we should be as permissive as is reasonable in relation to bees. There have to be reasonable guidelines in place, but I think it's a really positive direction for our city. And for cats, I think bringing them into the bylaw with the particular requirements that we are proposing, there was clearly overwhelming support for these amongst the community. 78% agreeing with mandatory desexing, 82% with mandatory microchipping. There is very clear desire for this, I think, within the community. and it seems responsible. So overall, I think this is a very good bylaw. I'm very happy to be voting for it. I just want to thank officers for what I think was very excellent work in relation to it. I don't believe there are any further comments. Looking around the room, there do not appear to be any. In that case, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. I'm going to move now to item 7.3, the major projects report. I'm going to move it to put it on the table. I have a seconder, Councillor Duncan. Thank you very much. We'll take our usual approach on the major projects report. I'll go through each project one at a time, giving councillors the opportunity to ask questions in relation to those. I will just check beforehand, are there any initial comments that you'd like to make, Lynn, before we get started?
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief comment. This report's for the major projects as at 31 March. A summary update is that we've just completed the reports for April and the overall status for all the projects has remained the same.
Cool. Thank you very much. All right. So I'll start moving through each of the particular items, starting with Eastern Porirua Enabling Infrastructure. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Matua Upoko. Thank you, Lynn, for coming in. I have a real concern about how we are articulating the risk with regards to the Te Kāinga Order's this process of disestablishing its large-scale projects plan. So my question to you is, is it officers' understanding that the project is going to impact the total deployment of the work that's been done as part of Porirua regeneration, or what elements are going to, as we understand, are going to be severely curtailed? And secondly, noting the status update that you've just given, are we any closer to getting at least a time frame from Kāinga Order as to these types of implications?
Councillor, you will have noticed over time that this is focused on the Three Waters infrastructure rather than the broader KO issues. You're probably as aware as we are of what's going on with the broader issues around land development and the construction of social housing. So we've boiled this down onto the certainties. Well, I say certainties in a sea of uncertainty, but the things about which we are most confident and where we will have the assets vested to us. In terms of the broader picture with respect to social housing and CHIPS, you're probably as informed as we are.
So it would still be axiomatic to think that if there isn't the end point, which is the actual provision of social housing, community housing, however you want to slice and dice this, it still requires the heavy work that was necessary, the enabling works, which this project area does pertain to, right?
Yes, no matter, houses will be built, no matter who owns or manages those, they will still require this infrastructure to support that development.
Okay, no more questions. Thank you.
Mayor Baker.
Thank you. A similar vein, now that we know that the KO office in Porirua or in our region is going, and those decisions are being moved to Auckland, will we end up getting updates or them coming into our office to give us updates? Because we know that one of the decisions that came from Auckland, I had to intervene and go to the minister, and we had it over changed. Are we likely to have to do that again? Because having a voice on the ground made a difference, and now they're moving it out of our region. Will we get more say or not?
The only funding that is attached to the regeneration project are these so-called tranche one funding. So the ones you see in front of us are the water parts of that. There is no further funding. We're the only large-scale project out of Auckland, so the only thing we've been told is large-scale projects will be run out of Auckland. They're still working through the staffing implications. The staff on the ground here are still on the ground, but we understand that they'll be going through those normal employment relations processes like consultation, etc. So not 100% clear when all that will be closed down. I will make an approach. We've kind of been having conversations, but we will make an approach to get a more formal understanding at the end of that. We're close to the end of that process, how they intend to run the east and what the plan is. We do get kind of mild assurances that houses will be built, but in what form and whether they will be social houses or some other kind of houses. So it's Mike's term, a sea of uncertainty. So don't really know, and clarity is probably still a month or so away.
Okay, I just want to make sure we get the infrastructure that they've said they're going to provide, and they're not going to undercut it and reduce what they've provided in contracts, because
They have given us assurances around that, so we're as confident as we can be.
Thank you.
No further questions on that item. Moving through to the Northern Growth area. Any questions? Councillor Filo.
I'm just wondering when that's going to come back to us. We were meant to have a workshop on it. Is that right?
I can speak to that.
Nick?
Chair?
Yeah.
We can bring the Northern Growth area back to you. We're just looking at a master plan approach, which we're bringing to the executive leadership team the next couple of weeks. And then if councillors wish, we can bring you a briefing on that before the end of election, if you'd like that.
Cool, thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes, Jim?
We do have a workshop on Plymouth Farm coming up. It's the date. Yeah, yes. Pardon me. I can't remember the date. Can someone help me out? It's in. Yes, it is. Yep.
Through the chair, I understand that workshop was on the 1st of May. It didn't happen because the timing ran late. So that's now coming back to council as a council paper on the 29th of May.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Lynn.
So, Mayor Baker, did you have a question?
Probably a question for officers. Do we know if the proposal by Greater Wellington with their transport costs to be put on developers, whether those developers have been approached?
Not that I'm aware of, but we'll find out.
Thank you.
No further questions on the Northern Growth area. Central City wastewater storage tank. Ran across the board, no questions. Excellent.
So, Mr. Chair,
yeah,
so there is
absolutely.
a site visit coming up on the first week in June, so we'll be publicising that shortly if anyone's interested in having another look at that.
Oh, thank you very much, Mike. Right. Solids handling upgrade. No questions around solids handling upgrade. No. Odour treatments. No. All happy. Rukatane Point Pump Station. Nothing on Rukatane Point. No. Spicer Landfill Cell 3A. Spicer Landfill Resource Consent. The room just shifted. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you. Obviously, the reporting is somewhat different from most of the items that we've had so far on this report. I guess I don't even know if there is a question to this, but I think that what certainty can we give the public, and particularly affected properties that actually don't even sit inside the Porirua City Council boundaries around the particular issues that are raised around odour control, which seem to be, as detailed in this report, the source of the challenge for us to be able to move forward towards having a resource consent validly submitted.
So your question is, what certainty can we give them?
Yeah.
I'm I think probably understandably reluctant to give you a definitive statement on that at this point, Councillor. This is a big landfill that smells bad, and it's close to some houses. I would be lying if I said to you I think I could solve that conflict.
How humble of you. Thank you. No more questions.
Any other questions on that item? Don't appear to be so. Aotea Lagoon South End. Board. Local water done well. No. Curbside services. No. Harbour and catchment. Climate change program. So all green. That brings us to the end of those. I'm actually just trying to remember. Apologies. I had a question about the climate change program and I've blanked on it. So, not important. I'll follow up on it separately. So that's all of the items within that report. So in that case, if there are no further questions, I will put the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Opposed? That is carried. All right, moving through to the finance report, March 2025. I will move that to get it on the table. Seconded by Mayor Baker. Thank you very much. So I can now open it for discussion. Do we want to have officer comment before we get started? Yep.
So through the chair, I'll just do a brief introduction. Ian is on leave, so Peter and Sam are here to support some of the detail. Pardon me, a problem with my voice this morning. Probably 3-4 comments just to frame this up. Overall, from a profit and loss point of view, we're largely on track, allowing for the fact that obviously we've got shortfalls in the Wakakatahi subsidies that we knew about. Personnel costs are on track, but they don't allow for some of the changes that are being made or have been made. That'll start to come through in subsequent reports. There's a key assumption I think that we should all be aware of in terms of the overall status of the report, which is that we're assuming that Bartholomew Park will be vested to us before the end of the financial year. That could be $80 million of assets coming onto our books, which would then start attracting depreciation. So at this stage, practical completion is due in June. So there might be a wash up at the end of the year, or it might flow into next year, I'm not sure. So just be aware of that. I guess the other large item, or the other key item just to observe from the report, is you can see a sort of a sinking lid on the capital expenditure. My expectations is that, and that of my colleagues, is that that will probably continue to reduce. Some of it is directly related to decisions that we made around transport, but there's also a seemingly ongoing reduction in the current capital expenditure from Wellington Water Limited. So there's further risks around that based on what we see. I can't give you an absolute number, but indicatively we could be down towards 100 to 110 million. I'm not concerned about that from a financial point of view, but there's obviously that balance of getting work done. I'll pass it to any other comments that you would like to make, guys, or should we take questions?
I was just going to make a comment. I've been looking at when we came here in December, and we have definitely, our surplus is growing on the net controllable costs, and I just wanted to make that aware, and that's mainly around the revenue streams that have got a lot stronger since the December position, and then we've just completed the April report, and it's fairly comparative to the March report, so we are tracking quite nicely to the end of June financials.
All right, thank you. I'll open for discussion, starting with Councillor Leggett.
Jim, you mentioned potential further Wellington Water reductions in capital expenditure. Is that related in any way to their restructuring around their contracting? Because they did mention when they came to brief us a slowdown potentially. Is that related to that?
It would appear in their budgeting they had. The answer to that is I don't think so at this stage. We were ahead of plan for some of the Titahi Bay renewals last year, so we're not seeing that investment necessarily coming through into this year. What I do see is that they have budgeted for quite high levels of capital expenditure for reactive renewals. You could argue those are sort of contingencies. We don't know. There might be a pipe burst between now and the end of the year. But they're quite high contingencies. To be honest, it seems that all work that's being done at the moment around the capital works is related to the tank. Otherwise, we're sort of pretty much standing still.
If I could just add, Chair, is it okay? So the vast majority of that Wellington Water stuff is around the sludge and the odour capex. There is, Jim's right, there is some stuff around renewals that has been chilled a little bit, but the 80% I think is around those two projects and them phasing into next year instead of this year.
That's all your questions, Councillor Leggett. Yeah. Any further questions, comments, Councillor Thielo?
Thanks. The depreciation that was listed in March was 29.5 million. Just wondering where or what have those depreciation been spent on? Was it renewals or?
So depreciation is based on all items that have been capitalised. So we would have seen a lift in depreciation due to the revaluations of roads coming through from last year. When we get and we've just received the revaluation for waters, we made a decision that within the annual plan we would not take depreciation into our accounts this side of the structural changes because they'll be significant. Is there any other comment, Peter, you would like to make about depreciation? I don't think. Nope. Okay.
Isn't that for the next financial year, the depreciation for our current annual plan?
So we start depreciating as soon as an asset is capitalised.
Also had a question around the landfill asset, the cell A. Is that funded through the landfill surplus or is that funded through debt?
So all the capital investment in the landfill is funded through surpluses.
Okay. Where would we see the remaining surplus from the landfill within this sheet? What would it be under?
So surpluses will be in a reserve. Peter can answer this one.
Through the Chair. So that's all included on the balance sheet or the statement of financial position. It all comes under the equity figure. So you can't actually see that individually in the report at the moment. It's all lumped into the equity.
Yeah, so the reserves for surpluses sit inside the equity line in the accounts.
Did you say the statement of financial position?
Yeah, so on page 114, equity is at 2.055 million. It will be sitting inside that.
Oh, right, yeah, I see that. 2.5, is it liabilities and equity? Or I guess
No, equity, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Equity is separate to liabilities. Equity and liabilities together add to assets.
So the landfill surplus is within the equity?
Yes, and within our LTP, we've projected what the surplus position will be at, say, 2030, or at the end of the LTP period, based on the capital investment profile that we assumed during the LTP. And I think that's sitting at around about 20 million at that point.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. You just sent a shiver down my spine when you said about the 80 million being vested in council. What does that do to us for depreciation?
I could have a crack at this easily, but I'm going to hand over to my acting CFO, Peter, and just articulate that one, I think.
So that's one of the water assets. They're the water pipes. So that will have a big impact on our depreciation next year. My understanding is that it will impact depreciation, but we're not going to rate for it.
So, were you referring to the water?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So to give you some indication, we've received the information. It's being modelled inside there's assumptions being made by the regional modelling team who are doing the work. We're seeing a valuation increase of around close to 40% increase from prior valuations.
Any further questions or comments on this paper? Councillor Hayward.
Kia ora no. I just want to get a sense of the nature of the carryovers that we are already looking to have. I think this is covered in point 20 of the report. And I'm noting that we are already looking to have a reduction in CapEx, which would be close to a third, almost, give or take. But the carryover at this stage is about 1/11 of the 117 million. Is that a proportion that is normally the amount, the normal proportion that we'd have for end of year carryovers? I think we usually carry over a lot more typically.
Through the chair, may I invite Lynn to the table? You're actually correct, Councillor Hayward, that would be true.
Through the chair, if I understand the question, you're talking about what our actual CapEx is compared to what the original budgets were. So some of the projects, like Wenera to Onopoto, we have pushed out. So it's in terms of our planning. So it's not a carryover because we're not. Usually we only carry over if we're in the middle of a project. We've got a contract for the project works, and therefore we carry over what hasn't been spent for the current year CapEx.
My apologies. My point wasn't so much about the projects that have been shifted out. That would account for the 152 to 117 drop in CapEx. My concern is about the proportion of carryover that this report seems to suggest we're going to have at the end of this financial year. Seems to be a much smaller proportion than what we would normally carry over in previous financial years. That would be true?
Through the chair, sorry, I don't have the background as to what we've carried over in prior years to compare it. It will depend on the mix of projects that are happening at the time.
So through the chair, I think, it's not atypical, I think, from looking at the prior accounts that we would have at least 20% carryovers. So 10% is actually lower than what we would normally do, taking into account the fact that we've got several projects in abeyance that we've made decisions on around transport. We're doing really well in terms of, say, like the property projects at the moment, where we've only got a couple of projects which are going to fall into next year. So we're progressing against the things that we can do really well. And with Wellington Water, I don't think we're going to see, the only thing that you're going to see that will be carried forward. Well, they're on budget, they're on target in terms of the major tanks. So those other items I talked about were active renewals. So that if nothing blows, there's nothing to be carried forward. So I think you're right, Councillor.
So are officers concerned that, notwithstanding the point that you've just made, that we are going to be able to deliver what we are delivering, but there's less of a carryover, which then creates concern for me that there is not as much work that we are going to have in successive years.
Yes.
So as to maintain what we can show the people of Porirua that we are delivering. And that seems to be an issue in terms of our overall spend. And I'm just, at the quanta, not necessarily the individual projects, but the overall quanta, that gives me concern.
So can I, through the chair, so
there's a bit of a quirk. This year there's a bit of a quirk with the CBD tank in particular. That is a big chunk of work that is on time and, in fact, a little bit ahead of time. So we're not seeing what you'd normally expect to see there with respect to a carryover. You're correct in one point, Councillor, that we would love to be spending more money on renewals. Now, we don't have a lot of money on renewals at the moment, affordability, right? So Jim's right from his lens. Yes, we are, from a financial perspective, this is good news. From a deliverability perspective, maybe not so much. We're very acutely aware of that. We are doing what we can. We have a bunch of stuff coming online around the sludge and the odour in particular. But I think to your core question about the quantum of carries over, not actually too worried about that, because I think that's more of a quirk, but the sense of your question is good with respect to renewals and the need for us to make sure we're renewing our assets, both in transport and in Three Waters.
That gets my meeting, and I have no questions. Thank you. Kia ora.
I've got one more question from Councillor Filo.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to my first question around depreciation. I wasn't asking how that figure was worked out. We rate for depreciation, so therefore we receive money for depreciation. Is that correct?
So our current policy is that, our current financing strategy is that we are recovering, I think it's 83 to 84% of our depreciation, and in the original annual plan we were going to try and increase that by 1% per year. Within the annual plan consultation, we proposed that we would hold that percentage at the same level as it has been.
Yes,
rather
sorry,
than
I'm not
increasing it.
asking about that,
Sorry,
Jim.
sorry, councillor.
Mike's going to speak to this as well.
Well, can we just let Kathleen
if
finish
you'd
the
like to
question?
finish
So
that.
I want to understand it.
Yeah. So I'm not asking about that part. I get that part. So that means that as a ratepayer, part of my rates contribute to that depreciation cost that we're rating
Correct.
for, correct? So,
Correct.
So part of my rates is actual money that comes into our account that goes into the depreciation. You know, it's ring fenced to depreciation.
That's correct.
Right. So what my question was that 29 million of depreciation expense, and when I say expense, I think, okay, so it's been spent. I'm asking, what was it spent on? Was it spent on renewals or?
So it's spent on all the assets that we've invested in. It could be roads, it'll be all manner of the assets that we are investing in. So it will be anything to do with water, transport, property, that make up our asset base. So if you look in the balance sheet, you'll see a balance sheet item for the value of assets. It's related to those assets that we're carrying on the books.
So I would find it under you'd see the expense of 29 million depreciation expense, and it would be counted in our assets.
Yeah, so if I had $100 million worth of water assets, and it's got a life of 50 years, then I'd depreciate that at 2% per year, and that would be expensed into the P&L account.
Right. So we've instead of using debt for some of the assets, we've used that 29 million. Is that?
So I want to be clear here so everyone understands this. I know this is a tricky subject, so I'm going to have a glass of water if you don't mind. So depreciation is, the objective here is that as we invest in assets, they have a certain life, and depending on that life will determine the rate at which we depreciate that asset. You normally depreciate those assets in a straight line basis, so in a proportionate basis per year. So our depreciation will go up and down according to the level of investment that we are making in our assets across the community. So we attempt to try and ring fence those expense in for the reason that when we get to the end of the life of the asset, we have money available to reinvest in replacement assets. That's essentially the purpose of accounting for depreciation in our expense statement. So if we didn't do that, we would be under-recovering on rates, and that burden would then fall to subsequent generations down the stream, down the line. Is that understood by councillors?
Yep, I get that part.
Yep. And Mike, did you have something you wanted to quickly add to that?
I was just going to quickly add this. So you're right, depreciation should be used to fund renewals. Across the country, we haven't done a good job of that, which is exactly why we're doing the Three Waters reform, which we'll be talking to you about Hubbar's 10.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Mike.
I think that brings us to the end of questions on that. So I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Opposed? That is carried. We do have just enough time. We're going to now move through into public excluded. So I will move that we go into public excluded, seconded by Councillor Ford. All those in favour, please say aye. Opposed? That is carried.